Claire never planned to fall for Ethan, yet the feeling grew quietly, the way soft rain gathers on a Seattle sidewalk without anyone noticing at first. She worked with him everyday meetings, quick lunches, shared deadlines, and although their connection was gentle and professional, it carried a warmth she couldn't easily ignore. Ethan wasn't the loud or flashy type. He had this calm presence, a voice that always sounded patient, and a way of listening that made Claire feel understood in a world where most people rushed through conversations. But he had a girlfriend, everyone knew it, and Claire respected that boundary with her whole heart. She never tried to take anyone's place, never hinted at her feelings, never stepped beyond what was appropriate. Still, there was something she could never forget: the soft perfume scent that sometimes lingered on Ethan's shirts, especially in the mornings. Every time he walked past, a familiar sweetness drifted behind him, gentle and warm. It wasn't just a smell, it was a reminder that someone else was close to him, someone who hugged him goodbye in the mornings or leaned on his shoulder during weekends. Claire tried to push the feeling away, but it always returned whenever that scent brushed past her desk. It lived in the small corners of her mind, becoming something she associated with comfort, something she almost envied without wanting to. She wasn't jealous of the girl. She was jealous of the closeness, the emotional space she herself could never enter. One evening, after a long 9-hour shift filled with deadlines and endless revisions on a marketing proposal, Claire left the office feeling drained. The streets were glowing with wet reflections after a light drizzle, and the cool air felt soothing on her skin. She walked through a department store on her way to the bus stop, mostly to kill time and shake off the heaviness from the day. But then she paused near a perfume display. Her heart gave a small, unsteady beat. There it was, the exact perfume she had smelled on Ethan every single morning. She didn't know the name before, not until that moment, but the instant the scent drifted from the tester strip, she recognized it deep inside. For a second, she closed her eyes. It was like stepping into one of those quiet feelings you never talk about but always carry. She didn't buy it to pretend to be someone else or to lure anyone into anything. She bought it because she wanted to understand. She wanted to know what made Ethan smile when his girlfriend hugged him, what memory lived in the softness of that fragrance, why it felt so warm every time she caught it in the air. She bought it because sometimes, when your feelings stay locked inside your heart, the smallest things become a way of processing them, a way of letting yourself breathe. She walked home quickly, the perfume box small and delicate in her hands. The decision felt strange, almost reckless for someone as cautious as she was. Yet it also felt private, harmless, like keeping a diary that no one would ever read. When she reached her apartment, she opened the bottle, sprayed a little on her wrist, and inhaled. The scent was soft, feminine, and calming. It didn't make her feel like someone else. It made her feel closer to a feeling she had been denying for too long. She told herself it was nothing more than curiosity, nothing dangerous, nothing crossing boundaries. She was allowed to wear any perfume she wanted. No one owned a scent. So why did it still make her heart beat a little faster? The next morning, she woke early, nerves buzzing under her skin, even though she didn't understand why. She wasn't dressing up for anyone. She was simply trying something new. She wore the perfume lightly, just enough to feel its softness around her. When she entered the office, everything felt ordinary. People rushed through hallways. Printers hummed. Coffee machines hissed. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that Ethan wouldn't even notice. He was always focused, always calm, always respectful. But when she passed by his desk, something unexpected happened. Ethan paused mid-sentence while talking to another coworker. His expression shifted just slightly, his eyes lifting toward her, as if a memory had brushed against him. He didn't say anything, just watched her for a moment longer than he usually did, long enough for her to feel her heart stumble. She kept walking, pretending she didn't notice. but she felt the moment cling to her, warm and confusing. She hadn't bought the perfume for attention, but the way Ethan's eyes had lingered on her made her feel something she had avoided for months, a tiny spark of hope, even though she knew that hope was dangerous. Throughout the rest of the morning, she caught him glancing at her more than once. Not in a way that crossed lines, not in a way that felt inappropriate, but in a way that told her he sensed something familiar around her. She kept her distance, kept her professionalism, kept her heart in check. But deep inside, she knew something had shifted. A story that had been quiet for so long had just taken its first breath. The next morning, the air in the office felt strangely charged, as if something invisible had shifted between Ethan and Claire after that brief moment when he paused at her scent. Claire tried to act normal, keeping her focus on the marketing reports and planning the next campaign, but she could feel her pulse picking up every time she sensed Ethan approaching. She didn't want him to notice anything different. She didn't want to fall into some illusion or feed any expectation her heart might be quietly building. Yet fate didn't seem interested in protecting her from it. When she stepped into the elevator on her way to the third-floor meeting, Ethan walked in at the last second. The small space filled with the soft hum of the elevator and the faint whisper of her perfume. He turned slightly, his brow lowering as he inhaled. Not suspicious, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful in a way she hadn't seen before. "Claire," he said quietly, not breaking eye contact, "are you wearing something new?" She felt her breath catch for a second, but she forced a careful smile. "Just trying a different perfume," she said lightly. She hoped the answer would end the moment, but Ethan kept his eyes on her for a heartbeat longer, as if he was searching for a memory he couldn't fully reach. The elevator dinged, and they stepped out. The silence between them filled with unspoken questions neither of them dared to voice. The day moved fast after that. Yet every hour carried small moments that made Claire feel out of balance. During their team meeting, Ethan chose the seat next to hers even though other seats were empty. He didn't sit too close, didn't cross any lines, but she felt his presence more than ever before. Whenever she spoke, he watched her with a softness that made her stomach twist. She told herself it was nothing, that perfume shouldn't matter this much, that he was simply being his usual kind self. But deep down, she sensed a shift. It wasn't inappropriate, but it was undeniable. He seemed more aware of her, more tuned in, as if the familiar fragrance had opened a door inside him that he hadn't realized was locked up by lunch. Claire could feel herself overthinking every small interaction. When Ethan passed her desk, he paused for half a second, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. And when she printed something near his workstation, she caught him glancing sideways with a faint, almost confused smile. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't crossing boundaries. It was simply attention. The kind people give when something about you feels unexpectedly familiar. Claire kept reminding herself that he had a girlfriend, that whatever he felt was emotional confusion, not intention. The last thing she wanted was to interfere with someone else's relationship, or create a misunderstanding. Still, she couldn't deny how her own heart reacted every time he looked at her with that searching expression. It was bittersweet warm, yet painful, comforting yet dangerous in the late afternoon. When the office started to quiet down, Claire felt the exhaustion of the day settle in her shoulders. She packed her bag slowly, ready to escape before her thoughts tangled any deeper. But before she could stand, Ethan appeared beside her desk. He didn't seem nervous, just thoughtful, like he had been carrying a question all day, and had finally decided to release it. "Claire," he said softly, "can we talk for a moment?" She looked up, surprised but unable to read the expression in his eyes. It wasn't guilt, and it wasn't excitement either. It was something gentler, something deeper, something she wasn't prepared to face. She followed him to a quiet corner near the windows. where the city stretched out below them in shades of soft gold and fading blue. "I know this might sound strange," he began, rubbing the back of his neck as he searched for the right words. "But when you walked by this morning, something felt familiar, like I recognized something. And I've been thinking about it all day." Claire froze, unsure how to respond. She didn't want him to misunderstand, didn't want to cause trouble, didn't want to be the center of anything complicated. She tried to smile gently. "It's probably just the perfume," she said. "Scents can trigger memories. It's normal." But Ethan shook his head slightly, as if he wasn't fully convinced. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but I don't think that's all of it." Her heart tightened, unsure whether to feel hope or fear. He continued, "I've been noticing things. Not because I should, just because I do." That evening, when Claire stepped outside with Ethan, the Seattle air felt cooler than usual, carrying the hint of rain that made the city lights shimmer like small stars fallen onto the pavement. She wasn't sure why he wanted to talk, but she could feel the tension in the air. Not uncomfortable, just full of something unspoken. Ethan looked different from how he looked in the office. His shoulders were tense, his eyes restless, like he had spent the whole day fighting with a thought he couldn't shake. Claire tried to keep her calm, telling herself not to expect anything, not to read into anything, but her heart beat a little faster anyway. He took a slow breath as if preparing himself. "I know this probably sounds strange," he began, his voice lower than usual, "but when I smelled that perfume this morning, it hit something inside me. Not just a memory. Something deeper." Claire's stomach tightened, but she stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I didn't want to make it weird," he continued, "but all day, I kept catching myself noticing you more. And not because of the perfume, because I think I've been doing that for a while." His honesty startled her. He wasn't dramatic. He wasn't trying to charm her. He was simply telling the truth he had been avoiding. Claire felt her throat tighten. "Ethan," she said carefully, "you're in a relationship. You shouldn't confuse yourself because of one moment." He nodded slowly, looking down at his hands. "I know. And I would never betray that. But today made me realize something. Maybe I've been forcing myself not to notice things." There was no accusation in his tone. No romantic claim, just a quiet struggle of someone who had been denying his emotions for too long. The city noise around them softened, making the space between them feel strangely intimate in a calm, safe way. Claire didn't want to be the cause of trouble in his life. She liked him more than she ever admitted, but she wasn't reckless with anyone's heart. "You need to figure things out without involving me," she said gently. "Whatever you're feeling, take time to understand it. I don't want to be the reason you make a mistake." Ethan lifted his eyes, and there was something warm but heavy in them, a kind of gratitude mixed with confusion. "You're right," he said quietly. "But I couldn't go home today pretending nothing happened. I needed to say something." When he turned to look at the skyline, the lights reflected in his eyes, giving him the appearance of a man who had been carrying a silent burden for far too long. Claire watched him, her heart aching with a mix of affection and sadness. She wanted to comfort him, but she kept her distance, knowing that lines mattered. After a few moments of silence, Ethan sighed deeply. "I don't want to hurt anyone," he said. "But I also don't want to lie to myself anymore. I need to understand why I feel this." Connection. The word connection made Claire's heart tremble, but she forced herself to stay grounded. She whispered, "Just be honest with yourself and with her. That's all you can do." He nodded again, this time with more clarity. "I will, but for now, thank you for listening." They said goodnight, and Claire walked away, feeling like she had stepped out of a dream, she wasn't sure she wanted to wake from. She didn't look back, but she felt the weight of the moment following her all the way home. That night, she lay in bed staring at her ceiling, replaying everything over and over. She didn't want hope. Hope hurt. Hope made you imagine futures that didn't belong to you. She reminded herself again and again that Ethan wasn't hers. No matter the connection, no matter the softness in his eyes, no matter the warmth she felt every time he spoke to her. She had to stay grounded, stay respectful, stay careful. Feelings could be powerful, but choices mattered more. 2 weeks passed quietly. Ethan didn't bring up their conversation again. He didn't act strange or distant, but there was a subtle shift in him. Their conversations became shorter, more careful, as if he didn't trust himself to say too much. He didn't stand as close, didn't linger around her desk, didn't look at her with the same searching expression. Claire thought maybe he had worked things out with his girlfriend. Maybe he had stepped back to protect everyone involved. She tried to accept that possibility with maturity, even though it hurt a little. She told herself she would be okay. She always had been. But then, on a Monday morning, something subtle but startling happened. Ethan walked into the office looking calmer than she had seen him in weeks. His smile was small but real. He seemed lighter, almost like he had made a decision that finally brought him peace. But the thing that caught Claire off guard the most wasn't his expression. It was the absence of the perfume scent that always clung to him. For the first time since she had known him, that familiar fragrance wasn't there. It felt like a quiet sign, a gentle shift in the air, a small warning that their story was about to change again, whether she was ready for it or not. When Claire saw Ethan walk into the office that Monday morning, something felt different in the air, as if a quiet storm had passed and left the sky clear behind it. He moved with a calm she hadn't seen in weeks, and the usual trace of his girlfriend's perfume, the scent that had once filled the space around him, was completely gone. Claire tried to stay focused on her work, telling herself not to jump to conclusions or assume anything about his personal life, but her curiosity tugged at her the entire morning. Ethan didn't approach her like he usually did, didn't hover near her desk or pause to talk. Instead, he waited until lunch, when most people had already rushed out of the building. Claire was packing her things when she heard a soft knock on the side of her cubicle. She turned, and there he was, hands in his pockets, expression steady but gentle. "Can we talk?" he asked, not nervous, not uncertain, just sincere. She nodded and followed him into the break room, where sunlight fell in quiet patches across the table. As they sat down, Claire felt her heartbeat quicken, unsure of what was coming but sensing it would change everything. Ethan didn't waste time. He took a slow breath and said, "I ended my relationship." The words landed softly but powerfully, like a door closing in the distance. Claire didn't know how to react. She didn't want to seem relieved, didn't want to seem sad, didn't want to seem hopeful. She simply whispered, "Why?" Ethan looked down for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because it wasn't working. We were holding on because it was familiar, not because it made us grow. We weren't hurting each other, but we were stuck." He wasn't bitter, wasn't blaming anyone. He spoke like someone who had finally accepted a truth he had avoided for too long. Claire listened quietly, her emotions swirling in a mix of empathy and fear. She didn't want to be the reason for anyone's breakup, and she didn't want Ethan to make life decisions because of a fleeting moment or a scent. Before she could voice her concern, Ethan continued, "And before you worry, this wasn't because of you, or the perfume. I didn't end anything because of one confusing day. I ended it because I realized I wasn't being honest with myself." Claire's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her heart still felt heavy with caution. She didn't want to step into anything too fast, or assume that his decision meant he wanted something from her. She spoke softly, "You didn't have to explain this to me." Ethan shook his head. I did, because that day, when I felt something familiar, and I couldn't stop noticing you, it made me realize how disconnected I'd been from my own feelings. It wasn't just about a scent. It was about what I'd been pushing aside. Claire looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the difference. His eyes weren't confused anymore. They weren't searching or conflicted. They were steady, calm, clear. I don't expect anything from you, he said gently, leaning back a little. I just needed to tell you the truth. And I needed you to know that whatever connection I felt, it wasn't a mistake. Claire's breath caught in her throat. She had spent weeks building walls inside herself, walls of caution, of guilt, of fear of wanting something that wasn't hers. Those walls trembled now, but she refused to let them fall too quickly. Ethan, she said quietly, I didn't buy that perfume for attention or for you to notice me. I bought it because I wanted to understand what made you smile. It wasn't about replacing anyone. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried all the vulnerability she had kept hidden. Ethan smiled, not a big smile, but a gentle one filled with gratitude. I know, he said. Maybe that's why it worked. Not because you smelled like her, but because you were being yourself. Because you cared in a quiet way. The break room felt smaller suddenly, wrapped in a soft warmth neither of them could ignore. Ethan reached his hand across the table, not grabbing hers, not demanding anything, just offering a choice. His fingers stopped just inches from hers, waiting, respectful, patient, open. Claire stared at his hand for a moment that felt like a slow breath stretching across time. She thought of everything, their conversations, the confusing gaze, the moment she had almost let herself hope. The perfume bottle sitting untouched on her dresser. She thought of how careful she had been, how much she had tried to protect everyone involved, including herself. Then with a calm she didn't expect, she placed her hand gently over his. The touch wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was steady, quiet, honest, two people reaching towards something new with maturity and respect. Ethan let out a soft breath, as if he had been holding it for weeks. Claire felt a warmth spread through her chest, not wild like a spark, but deep like a steady flame. They didn't make promises, didn't label anything, didn't rush into declarations. They simply sat there, hand in hand, letting the moment exist without pressure. It wasn't the perfume that brought them here. It was everything unspoken that had been growing between them long before that day. For the first time, their connection felt like something real, something not built on confusion, but on clarity. And as they walked out of the break room together, Claire realized that sometimes the heart finds its way not through grand gestures or perfect timing, but through quiet truth and gentle choices.